There's a couple of definitions that we need to learn here. One is called the contrapositive, and that is where you negate and switch the if-then. So the Q goes to the front, the P goes to the back like it did here, but we must negate both of those. So we're going to prove that the contrapositive is equivalent to the original statement. So to do this, P is T, T, F, F, Q is T, F, T, F, and the conditional will tell me that the only time that the conditional is false is when the premise is true and the conclusion is false. So this is false, and the rest of these are true. So the red is my answer column for this truth table. Same work over here, but I need to have a column for not Q, which is flip-flopping those. So this column will go false, true, false, true. This is also not P, so swap all those, become F, F, T, T, and I need to do the conditional with those two blues. The conditional is only false if the premise is true and the conclusion is false. So this is false, and the rest of these are true. So let's compare these two red columns. Are they the same? Yep, they both go T, F, T, T. So what we've done is we've used the truth table to prove that the contrapositive is equivalent to the original statement. The original if-then statement is equivalent to its contrapositive. So in words, we used this one earlier. If I live in Port St. Lucie, then I live in Florida, is equivalent to if I don't live in Florida, then I don't live in PSL. Remember with this, we take the Florida part, and it goes to the front, but I negated it, don't live. The PSL goes to the back, and it gets negated. So same steps here. If I eat strawberries, then I will get hives. If I eat strawberries, then I will get hives. So the hives has to go here with a not in front of it. So if I don't get hives, then this back part, the strawberry part, goes to the back and gets negated. Then I didn't eat strawberries. Just abbreviate it, strawberries. It is easier to do the contrapositive of a logical statement because I don't have to do all this writing out. The contrapositive tells me to put the T in the front, but negate it. Put this in the back, but negate it. The negation of a negated S is just S. So this is the contrapositive, and it is equivalent to that original statement. Two other words, converse and inverse. The converse of a statement is formed by switching the if and then. You only switch the if and then. So the converse of this is if Q, then P. And this is important. The new statement is not equivalent to the initial statement. The inverse of a statement is formed by negating the if and then. So starting with if P then Q becomes if not P then not Q. Same thing, the new statement is not equivalent to the initial statement. However, the converse and inverse of a particular statement are contrapositives and are equivalent, meaning this was the converse of this statement, this was the inverse of that same statement. These are contrapositives of each other. See, the P went to the front and got negated. The Q went to the back and got negated. And they are equivalent because they are the contrapositives. But the converse is not equivalent to the original statement, and the inverse is not equivalent to the original statement. So we want to write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of these statements. So this says if Q, then not R. What does the converse do? The converse switches. So to switch that, we just put the not R in the front, we put the Q in the back, and that's all we have to do. The inverse is where we negate. So that's one for me that's easy to remember, that inverse is negate, because I think about the inverse of a number is the negative, like the inverse of 5 is negative 5. So inverse is where you negate. So keeping the same order, we negate the Q. And if we already have not R, to negate that, we take away the not, and that's our statement. The contrapositive is where we switch and negate. So the R is going to come to the front, and it is an R because to negate not R, we take away the not. The Q goes to the back, but it must have the tilde in front. Now, same thing, write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of if the stereo is playing, then I cannot hear you. The converse is where we switch. So that means the hearing part goes in the front and the stereo playing goes in the back. And that's what this looks like. If I can't hear you, then the stereo is playing. All I did is swap the order. The inverse is where we negate. So going back to the original statement, I'm just going to put if the stereo is not playing, then it was originally I cannot hear you, then I can hear you. If the stereo is not playing, then I can hear you. The contrapositive is where we switch and negate. So the stereo goes to the back side and gets negated. The hearing goes to the front side and gets negated. And that's if I can hear you, then the stereo is not playing. The reason this is can is because in the original it was cannot, so it already had a not. I needed to take the not away to get the can. These are some variations of the conditional statement. This is just the same thing we've been doing, but it's in chart form. The conditional is if P then Q. The converse is where we switch, if Q then P. The inverse, we keep the order the same as it was in the beginning, but we negate. If not P, then not Q. And the contrapositive, we switch and negate. So if not Q, then not P. This might be something you want to put on your index card also. And this is just a chart, a truth table chart to show you what I mentioned a couple of screens ago, and that is this confirms that a conditional statement is equivalent to its contrapositive. See, everything here is in the same chart. Here's the truth table for the conditional, the truth table for the contrapositive, and you can see that the first column and the last column are the same. These are the truth tables for the converse and the inverse, and you can see that these two columns are the same. And that's telling you that the converse and the inverse are equivalent to each other. But the converse and the inverse are not equivalent to the original conditional.